completing the square, we have x squared minus 10x plus 4. And then if we look over to the right, we can see that I have a note attached that gives you the, let's say, the 5 steps on how to work on this problem using completing the square and solve. It says part 1 says if a is not equal to 1, then you have to divide the quadratic by a. What it means is there is a standard formula, or a standard formula for a quadratic equation. It is ax squared plus bx plus c. All these numbers a, b, and c, they are all constants, meaning they are just numbers. So what step number 1 is saying is, if you have a number and that number is not 1, then you have to divide the quadratic in order to make it into a simplified form, meaning that they would rather have a coefficient of 1 in front of that x right there rather than having any other number. So they want to make sure that they remove any variable in front of x, make it easier for us to work with the equation. Since we don't have any number in front of the x squared, since we only have like a 1, so it doesn't matter, because anything divided by 1 will remain the same. There is no difference. And now if you look at, so now we are done with number 1. We don't have any coefficient bigger than 1 in front of the x, rather the a. We look at part 2. It says write the quadratic in the form x squared plus bx equals c. This means that we have x squared minus 10x, and now that 4 we need to move it to the right, so we will have a negative 4. So in order for us to move the 4 to the right, we'll have a plus 4 equals 0, and then a minus 4, and then a minus 4. So these two will cancel. We are left with x squared minus 10x is equals to a negative 4 on the right. Now the third part of this completing the square is adding b over 2 squared to both sides of the equations, which means that this is our b. Our b will be a negative 10. So now we have x squared minus 10x plus our b. That b is a negative 10, so negative 10 divided by 2, and the whole thing has to be squared. Whatever we do on the left, you got to do it on the right. So now you have a minus 4 and then plus, open parentheses, rather negative 10 divided by 2, the whole thing squared. And if we continue further, we will have x squared minus 10x plus a negative 10 divided by 2 is just 10 divided by 2 is just 5, and the negative 1 is just negative 5, and the negative 5 squared, if you put in the parentheses, is going to give me a positive 25. So you have a plus 25 on the left, and also on the right we have a negative 4 plus 25. And then if you add the right, it's going to give me a positive 21. And then on the left, we are left with just x squared minus 10x plus 25. Okay, now we go on to step 4. It says factor both sides, left side of the equation, into a perfect square. Now we don't worry about the right for now. Let's just focus to the left. So I have a simplified, let's say, a quadratic equation. It doesn't matter how I solve it, it will give me a perfect square, because I created this equation from the original. Whatever way I did this equation, it should come up as a perfect square at the end. So now I have a 25 right here, meaning that whatever two numbers I get, when I multiply them, it should give me a positive 25, and when I add them, it should give me a negative 10. Let me repeat myself. Two numbers that I multiply, it should give me a positive 25, and when I add them together, it should give me a negative 10. So those two numbers is a negative 5 and a negative 5. Because negative 5 multiplied by negative 5, a negative and a negative give me a positive 25, and a negative 5 plus a negative 5 is going to give me a negative 10, so it works perfectly. So since it's going to be x minus 5, and x minus 5 is equals to 21, and it's asking me to give a perfect square, so that means I will have an x minus 5, the whole thing will be squared and equal to 21. Now if you move further, we need to solve for x, so we just take the square root of the left and the right, cancel, and then cancel out the square, and then you are left with x minus 5 is equals to plus or minus root of 21. The reason why we put plus or minus because whatever value that comes out of a radicand or a square root is going to give me a positive and a negative value. Now I need to solve for x, so I have a minus 5. To remove the 5 from the left, I add 5, and then I add 5 to the right. So it will cancel out. Negative 5 plus 5 give me a 0, so I will be left with x is equals to a positive 5 plus or minus square root of 21. And that is our final answer. It's a long something to think about when you're doing completing the square. If you just follow the steps, make sure that the coefficient in front of the a or the x squared has to be 1. If it's above 1, just remove it, divide by a the whole thing, the left and the right. They would rather have you like just the x squared in front. And then next one is just write the quadratic in the form, so x squared plus bx, and then the c, you just move it. If it's a negative c, move it to the right, it's going to be positive. If it's a positive c, move it to the right, it's going to be a negative. And then just add the b over 2 squared, so whatever the b value, and you just divide by 2 parentheses, and you square it, so you add it to the left and the right. And then number 4 you factor, you get the perfect square left and right, and then you just solve, and then you get a value. And that's how we work out the completing the square formula. And I hope this helps. And if you have questions, just give a comment below the video. Hope you enjoy this video, and happy studying.